Which job has, hands down, the worst impact on mental health? Any job where every day you are constantly being exposed to other people's trauma. Secondhand trauma day in and day out wears on mental health. I have a friend who works for CPS. You wouldn't believe the number of times she's tried to get a child taken out of a horribly abusive home. Clear, physical evidence of sexual abuse, etc., but the case falls through because the police won't provide a detective who is good with children, then the child won't repeat accusations for official testimony. It's got to be up there with first responders. My brother worked for CPS as a caseworker for almost 8 years, which is about 6 years longer than people typically last. He shared some about his job in conversations with me, but I know he kept a lot of the worst stuff to himself. I'm fully convinced that Job played a large part in his path to drugs that eventually took his life. It's not the worst, see first responders and apparently veterinarians, but being an inner-city public school teacher broke me. Look, again, not as bad as those others, but I've seen and read enough that my decade in has been enough. I've had students murdered. One kid was shot for $12 worth of weed. I also taught the murderer. I've called DCS on many parents because my student came in beaten or starving. I paid for one of my students' lunches because she was pregnant and couldn't afford school lunch. Seen brutal fights that have ended with hospitalization and have also been hospitalized due to breaking up fights. You watch brilliant students discover drugs and overdose. You see kids with bright futures get pregnant and refuse to go to college because they will be supported by the baby's father who skipped town the day she gave birth. And you see kids fall through the cracks in the system to never be seen again. I've also reported 2 fucking pervert teachers. One didn't have enough evidence, but he was still let go, while the other currently enjoys prison. My first year, a few of us teachers started a club that would have lock-ins at the school because some of the kids needed a place to get food, get clean, and be away from the danger of home. I've never played more Monopoly in my life or eaten more Papa John's, and I really didn't like doing it, but it was worth it at graduation when one of my students that never missed club thanked me because it was the one night her mom's boyfriend couldn't get her. I still cry about it. I'm crying now. There were amazing positives. I have a few students that are now doctors that were once told that they would never graduate. Getting kids who couldn't read at the beginning of their freshman year to graduate with a full ride to college is a feeling that I can't really compare to anything. But at the end of the day, the lows are too low. I left the first school that I taught at 6 years ago because we had an incident that definitely wasn't a school shooting that failed only because the kid turned the corner. Directly into our school officer, and, out of fear, the kid killed himself instead of the kids on his list. I should have left then, but I thought it would get better, that I could handle it all. I can't. I'm tired. Update. This got bigger than I thought possible. Thank you all for reaching out. I've been trying to interact and comment on all the posts. First things first, you do not need to thank me. I'm a singular voice in a sea of Title I teachers, and you can find them also in the comments. We all have stories like this, both incredibly positive and less so. To the people wanting updates, the girl who I helped feed is doing well and has 2 beautiful kids. I haven't heard from the girl in club, and I hope she has found peace. Also, I've been trying to stay vague enough that I couldn't really be ID'd, but I have had one former student DM me and they got my name right. If you are curious if I taught you, DM me and I can tell you if I did or not. Also, my school was in the rural Midwest. This seems to be very important for a few people. The FBI evidence sifters in child sex cases. Weeks of freeze-framing children's faces during abuse videos and matching that to databases to identify the kids against other videos, missing children, etc., then putting it all in a timeline for prosecutors. Edit to add, they have to watch these videos looping back over and over to record audio, names, places, numbers, background noises, and any other evidence that might connect persons to acts or cases to other cases. I always submit this story when this issue comes up, out of respect for this guy. I'm an older dude, and back in the day, I had a role to play in one of these prosecutions of a kitty corn distributor. Now, historically, kitty corn had been enforced by USPS postal inspectors because historically distribution had been through the mail. When we were doing our case, I met the postal inspector who would be our witness. For 20 plus years, that's what this dude had done, testified in kitty corn cases. Among the things you have to prove with respect to each image is that the person depicted was under 18 when the picture was taken. This dude was the one who was doing to do that for us. We had all the images collected in a 5-thick 3-ring binder. You could open to any page, and he'd name the person depicted, tell you approximately the date the picture was taken, and tell you how old that person was on that date. For many, many of the victims, our witness knew that because he had met them, talked to them about the images, enlisted their help in prosecuting in general, not on a case-by-case basis, and convinced them to share with him what had to be In every case, horrifying experiences. And he remembered them all. Every story, every relative with a smile and a candy bar. He knew all the stories by heart. And then, on a monthly basis, he would fly to some place and give that testimony. Recount the stories for the jury. Recount his meetings with the victims. He would be there so that they didn't have to be. Anytime people talk about heroes they've met, I remember this guy. Just the most normal, average, mild-mannered guy you'd ever meet. And he spent at least half his working life doing this. My doesn't deserve top 10, but I worked at a payday loans place for a few months. If that didn't feel like legally working for the devil, I don't know what does. My dad is an oncologist. He handles it well, but that has to be up there. Every time you meet a new patient, it's during one of the worst, if not the worst time of their lives. And it's up to you to break it to them, their families, if the toxic treatment you have been administering is working, or if they should give up hope and get their affairs in order. On top of that, you have them attending appointments, telling you the kind of toll the cancer is taking on their marriage. So many people walk away from their beloved partner of 30 years rather than support them through this, not to mention their finances. Crime scene cleanup. Entire families murder-suicide. Seeing dead babies would wreck me. The smells, bodies turned to soup, brains splattered, blood, lots of blood, feces and urine, pets taking a chomp because they haven't been fed. Having to pull all carpet, pad and scrubbing subfloors, extracting body juices, high probability of bioillnesses, biohazards, blood, airborne pathogens. 100% will affect a sane person. One of my friends worked in a morgue. Not so recently, deceased comes in with his cat who had been eating him while trapped in the house for however long before being found. She adopted the cat and named him Hannibal. I don't know if it's the worst, but maybe. I'm a retired detective. In the latter part of my career, I was tasked with running our Special Investigations Unit. One of our responsibilities was computer crimes. 95% of those were child sexual abuse media investigations, child porn to the layperson. I trained and got certified in computer forensics. As a result, I spent many hours poring through thousands upon thousands of child sexual abuse images and videos. The seething white rage that would build up inside of me would necessitate an occasional break to go punch a wall or other inanimate object. The other detectives outside of our enclosed lab got used to the occasional outbursts by my other computer forensic examiners and me. Most of the time, I could endure it, but sometimes certain acts or victims would trigger rage in me that still affects me to this day. This in spite of the mandatory and regular therapy for our examiners that was established by policy. There is no redemption for people who abuse children. Caregiver. The racist, it's very hard to go on your day taking care of someone who spits in your face and calls you dirty while you're trying to help them wash up. The way people just die after you've finally had a relationship with them and cared for them for months, and how fast that empty bed gets occupied. You don't get any counseling or therapy, but you're expected to go on normally with your work shift. Veterinarian. They say you love animals, so you should do everything for everyone for free or else you're a villain. Don't mind the hundreds of thousands of dollars and 8 years of time it took to get there. People don't say for their pets, then we are the bad guys. Maybe slaughterhouse worker. Bit of a secondhand story, but I dated a girl. In her hometown, the slaughterhouse was a big employer that paid well. Apparently, they had X number of what are basically mental health days, and this was 20 years ago before that kind of thing was more top of mind, because people would have breakdowns or just walk off in the middle of a shift. Rather than fire these people or have them assume they can't come back, they just gave them a bit of paid time for it. Wildland firefighters, no one really talks about it, but since it's a part of my field of study, my instructor, who's been on a few hotshot crews and knows so many people in the wildland firefighting industry who have just ended their lives. You work 14 hours days for 2 weeks or more of some of the most physically demanding work anyone can do, usually can't shower, you're actively watching nature, including all its creatures being burned alive, moving their corpses, and possibly watching it destroy people's homes and lives. Not only that, but at any moment something can change and you'll burn alive in the fire too. It's not for the weak of heart, because even those who have the toughest hearts are struggling with depression. This pales in comparison to the first comment, but here's one. Probation parole officers. We get to know their whole families. We cheer them on when they succeed. We move heaven and earth to put things in place for success. No one talks about it, but when they pass away to violence and drugs, it hurts. I don't know if people truly know how bad the fentanyl crisis is. There's only 11 people from my graduating class still alive. A couple died in car ATV accidents, but the rest died from overdoses. My graduating class wasn't very large, but in small towns one really feels when an entire generation just disappears in a couple years. Never mind the grief and depression of loss. Even if you get over that, it feels weird and isolating to not have peers in one's community. I spent a summer as a legal intern in the homicide division of the Orange County DA, and much of my job that summer was to review and catalog photos of the victims in crime scenes. Disproportionately children, since it was a job that no one really wants to do, so it's easy to pass off to interns. I have no idea how anyone does that long-term. A few months was more than enough for a lifetime. Therapist. Listening to people's problems for 8 HRs every day will be extremely taxing. Therapist here. You're not wrong, it's taxing AF. When you start thinking about how many people's lives and their issues you hold, it actually brings on major anxiety. All while dealing with your own lives and personal struggles, including our own mental health. It's wild. Self-care and combating burnout is not something they focus enough time on in grad school. You hit the field basically blindsided because your practicums were easy AF and then all of a sudden people. Documentation, mandated reporting, referrals, your agency's policies, ethics, liability insurance, continuing education credits. Yeah, it's a lot. Does it have its rewards? Absolutely. Still a difficult job. That's why many of us have our own therapists. I'm actually shocked I had to scroll this far to see this. Social workers too, but therapists have it brutal as well. First responder here. Dead kids take a toll. Some helpful advice I was once told by a retired SWAT member was that he had a metal box in his head with an unbreakable lock. When you deal with something stressful, once you're done your job and talk about it with your peers, put that memory in the metal box, lock it, and only open it when absolutely necessary. Works great for me. Maybe might help someone else. It's not the worst, but my mother used to deliver Meals on Wheels. It's a program in the good states to deliver food to the elderly or homebound. She saved a few people in distress and found her share of dead folks, which sucks. She was often the only person some of those people would see each day. It was heartbreaking, and she did it when she was even eligible to receive the meals as she was elderly. I lost her to COVID BC. Stupid people ran our country. Farming. Trust me. Work as hard as you can, do everything as correctly as possible, live frugally, be resourceful as you can. Weather, pests, equipment failure, repair, and commodity prices wipe out your chances of any reasonable profit or profit at all. Sit with your accountant and banker and be told again and again how much of a total failure you are, and that if you're going to get ahead in this world, you're just going to have to work harder. Meanwhile, they go home after a hard 6 hours at work, and you head right back to the field to work until dark. I was an automation engineer once, worked a reasonable amount of hours, and was well paid for it. Then, for personal family reasons, I started farming. I had to do it. This is fucking peasant work, according to my accountant and banker, but it's infinitely more difficult than being an engineer ever was. Food service workers, constantly dehumanized, treated like garbage, even when service is damn near perfect. Injuries are common, but brushed over because you don't have time to be injured. And despite having shit wages, people will complain about having to tip as if we're just greedy workers. Had a genuine panic attack in the kitchen, open for customers to see with it being a cafe, because me and my one coworker were rushed, and everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong. Customers were awful before I even had a chance to mess up. People often complain about the prices, despite them being that way as a small business that almost went under during the start of the pandemic, and because we are paid $9 an hour compared to the usual $2 to $7 wages most baristas make everywhere else. However, $9 is still not a living wage. I only afford groceries and some of rent because of the tip money I make. I like to think I'm a kind person who has faith in humanity because I know not everyone is mean or evil, but when you're exposed to such a general part of the population and constantly abused as a staff member by customers, it's hard to keep that positive worldview and has definitely sent me into mental health spirals. Maybe we don't have it worse compared to firefighters or specific FBI evidence workers, but I'm a firm believer that the world would be a kinder place if everyone was required to work 2 years in the food service industry or 3 years in customer service, retail. I've heard trucking is really bad. Read about it in an article recently. They have to be away from home for days, if not weeks at a time. It's really difficult to hold down a relationship or family in any way. A good portion of their time on the job is spent in a perpetual state of exhaustion. Coffee, Red Bull, and other caffeinated beverages are being used 24/7 to keep them awake long enough to finish the trip. Never a good night's rest as you just sleep in whatever motel you find along the road or just in the cabin of your vehicle. Not to mention that driving a vehicle for that long is physically exhausting. Imagine holding your arms up in front of you for 6 to 8 hours a day, every day of the week. I just entered trucking from a lifetime of working a Walmart-type job. My company required us to be on the road living in the truck 4 weeks minimum, and you got 3 to 4 days home max. I really couldn't cope with the lifestyle. It's very taxing mentally, and it's rare to see a friendly, smiling face in the trucking world. A lot of the warehouse workers have crap attitudes, and the way your company schedules you, you're always running behind schedule, just sleep and drive, no time for yourself. Don't even get me started on how hard it is to find a place to park and sleep. There aren't enough parking spots at the truck stops. Many times I ran out of driving hours and had to park in a place where too much was going on to sleep, like on a on-ramp to the interstate where loud vehicles are constantly revving by. I quit 3 months into it. I'll gladly work $12 HR at Walmart to avoid all the headaches I encountered trucking. I've been ICOP for only 2 years. I can never see people the same again, and I've experienced more stress in that time than I have my whole life. And I've already seen way more than you would imagine. Everything about the job sucks. The schedule is terrible. I never see my family or old friends. I go from 0 to 100 on stress about 10 times a night. Unfortunately, I also work in a big city. Everyone hates me, and for some reason, it's become socially acceptable to be openly racist towards me. Every person I talk to is constantly lying to me, even the people who called me for help because they want someone to get in trouble badly enough. When the 1 out of 10,000 cops does finally make a mistake 5 states over, I have to pay for it with everyone's hate. I just wanted to save lives, and I already have saved more than I thought I would. But it's become so hard to put my vest on and get myself to work lately, and it crushes me to see some of my friends making 3 times my salary, working 6 hours a day from home while I'm out here in the trenches every night. Every decision I make affects somebody's entire life and freedom, or could cost me or my coworker's life. The amount of red tape I have to go through to do my job is insane. Most of the criminals I break my back to capture get released the next day or get let go in court on some stupid technicality. Nobody wants the job I have anymore, so there are never enough coworkers to help me. We are always understaffed, and by the time I show up to the lower priority calls, I'm met with hate because the response time is so bad. I get to hear Karen scream in my face about showing up hours later to her broken car window, even though 15 minutes ago, I just got done watching Jimmy gurgle his last breath succumbing to stab wounds while his mom looks on in. Horror. Even if I quit tonight, I believe most of my naive innocence and optimism for life could be shattered, and the mental health effects could last me for the rest of my life. And the weird cherry on top is that I've become kind of addicted to the adrenaline, and activities that used to excite me in my non-working life can sometimes feel mundane and purposeless now. Police, I would guess. Things I did in my career. Watched people burn to death in a car wreck. Did trauma care multiple times. Saved some, lost more, searched a house for a dead baby, found her in a bag, in a wardrobe, searched another house for a severed penis and a testicle that a mentally ill man had cut off. Saw multiple murder victims and blood-covered crime scenes. Told multiple people their family members were dead, including telling a 6- and a 7-year-old their parents were dead because daddy had shot mummy then himself. Suffered daily abuse from the public for 30 years. Got assaulted numerous times. Been to multiple autopsies, including child autopsies. Watched videos of murder and sexual abuse, including of children, in order to prepare it as evidence. Worked horrid shifts and lives an unhealthy lifestyle for years. Got virtually zero support for mental health in all that time. Was massively overworked the whole time. Dealt with the stress of trying to keep people alive and carrying massive caseloads knowing one slip up. Yeah, policing is terrible for your mental health. I can't imagine much worse. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to see more.